Episode 5. What is the dark side, or how does the dark side influence people? And I think mainly this topic is about human psychology. You know, one of the most interesting aspects of Star Wars is you know, Joseph Campbellian, Jungian archetype structures that you know are explorations of mythology and psychology. Today we're going to talk about the dark side of those aspects. One of the things that comes to mind is that often the light side reasons are given for dark side actions, and one of the most important pieces of the entire Star Wars puzzle is Anakin's fall being spurred by this belief that he could save somebody, and you could say that's selfish, but he's literally trying to save an innocent person from what he thinks is a fate that they're on. I thought she was. She was the center of his, you know, obsession that caused him to fall and caused him to become servile to Darth Sidious.
Ooh, is that a dark side trait?
Yeah, I think emotions, like very strong emotions, and honestly, they'd probably be better off saying negative emotions, because I think, you know, it depends on what you feel as an emotion, but just being controlled by your emotions rather than above them is very dark side. And they what was it? Yoda says fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side. So you could say, like, fear being the primary seducer of people into those paranoid feelings where everyone's your enemy, and you start to, you know, have like outbursts and interpersonal conflict that just continues to build and get worse. And like you see that in real life all the time. I think in general it's literally the dark side of psychology of the human heart or whatever. You know, it's all of the things that make you give in to impulsive, controlling, domineering behaviors, and then you double down and you create, like, you reinforce that those motives more and more as you become more attached. And then it's for Jedi, the light side is about non-attachment and not being swayed, not letting your training, your focus and disciplines be swayed by personal pride or personal pursuit. But who doesn't have selfish, you know, intentions sometimes? It's a part of every Star Wars character. It's a part of every human being.
So really, it's only one person with a big political plan, because all of Sidious's apprentices are just ultimately tools.
Yeah.
That's why he's the ultimate dark side user, because he bends other people to his will. It's like the dark side is kind of akin to the, like, you know, sort of like real world conceptualization of magic.
Well,
I see that.
Like exerting, you know, using the powers of the universe to exert your will on the natural world. And whereas the Jedi conception of the Force is more of a sort of like Buddhist, you know, like atheistic sort of like philosophy of, you know, the energy conception matter of the world.
Yeah, like going with that flow, which is harmonious. But even that, I think, has a balance between, like, it doesn't see the dark side of the Force, but it uses that almost like baseline raw force as, you know, as something positive. I do wonder if y'all consider the Force to have this bifurcated element to it, where is it a binary? Is the Force kind of like it must have polarity?
It's also perceived as that, I think.
Yeah.
But in reality, like most things, it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum. That's why we have gray Jedi. That's why we have dark Jedi. Because it's all just different conceptions of, really comes down to your personal philosophy, the kind of person you are, and the kind of things you hold important to you are going to influence how you use the Force.
But is there a polarity between, like it's constantly referenced as that, light side and the dark side, and even if it's a spectrum, there are two major.
Instead of like a spectrum, is it more just like this kind of nebulous sphere? That is it more like a political compass? Like is it more like a D&D alignment chart? I mean, we're talking about
because you get in Clone Wars. You remember that episode where Yoda goes and meets the Will? And
I saw that clip before.
Part of the problem with the Wills and kind of where they fit in is that originally Lucas had this big idea for them, and then they didn't, so now they just exist as like this thing,
like apocrypha kind of.
But it doesn't really add up to the whole equation, because so are they light if it like we don't know.
They're like paradoxical, right? I mean, they're just sort of a balance, a perfect balance that contains both light and dark.
I agree with you. Maybe the Force itself is not a duality. The Force is the Force. It all comes down to the conduit, which is, in this case, the person, the Force wielder. You can be more light or you can be more dark. They're just kind of like methods of conceiving. I don't know, but like it's implied that like feeding into, quote unquote, like negative emotions are going to enhance your ability to draw on the dark side. Like,
what about it?
So does the Force kind of like enhance your emotions in a way, while you also
I think it's the other way around. I definitely think it's your emotional state drives the.
Yeah. But of course, it's a little bit of everything, because if everything is truly connected, then yes, you are going to affect the living Force. Oh, that's actually something we're forgetting about. The actual very real, like Jedi philosophy of the differences between, what is it, the living Force and the, what's the other kind? Like the,
I'm not as well versed in this, Rob. This is all you.
Hold on, give me a second. I'm looking it up. Oh my god.
Becky,
Wikipedia has so many freaking ads.
Now's a good time for you to like, click, and subscribe, and leave a comment about what topics we cover on our next one.
So there is the living Force, which is conceived as the... Hold on, let's take this back a bit. The cosmic Force. The cosmic Force... It kind of gives a circular definition, but let me just read you what Wikipedia has. So for cosmic Force, it says, together with the living Force, which is the energy of all life, the cosmic Force formed the energy field that bound all things through the transcending space and time. The Force. Together. Through the cosmic Force, midichlorians formed a symbiotic relationship with living beings and communicated to them the will of the cosmic Force. Because of this will, nothing occurred in the galaxy by accident. By clearing the mind of any thoughts and acting on instinct, sentient Force wielders could listen to the Force's will and become an instrument of it, fulfilling their predestined path. The Jedi were agents of the Force's will.
Cool.
So that makes it kind of seem like the Jedi are not trying to sort of like wield the Force. They're almost like at the base of their philosophy trying to let the Force wield them. Now the living Force, by feeding into the cosmic Force, the living Force, the energy of all life, created and grew the Force, binding the galaxy together. The Force was the fundamental unity that underpinned all of creation. We know this.
Fundamentals.
Beyond its dualities, the Force had two complementary aspects. The living and the cosmic Force were symbionts.
It surrounds
The
us
latter
and
possessed a
penetrates
will
us.
that was communicated to all life through the symbiotic midichlorians, which connected the living with the cosmic Force. The will of the Force desired peace and community. When life let go of fighting and came together as one. At death, a life form returned to the embrace of the cosmic Force, renewing the cycle of the two aspects of the Force.
Wow. So there's a cool little like dividing cell or cell replication and
Yeah.
and
Through the
convergence.
Force, all life was connected. Every life form possessed their life force, also known as the spirit, life essence, Force essence, or vitality, each with its own echo in the Force, forming a symphony of life and death. However, individual Force sensitives perceived the energy field in various unique ways. The presence of a life form could be sensed in the form of a song in a greater symphony to one, while being a leaf on a large tree or the light of a fire to another. What?
Okay, I kind of get what it's trying to say, and I think it goes back to kind of what you said, where you can view it as a spectrum, and that would actually be more like something that has like a lot of variation and has a lot of like highs and lows, life and death, and contains a lot of polarity. But it's a beautiful like Fibonacci pattern, like fractal sequence that engages all aspects of life, instead of how the dark side users view it as more like extremes of how can you manipulate it towards your own selfish ends.
Exactly. So the Jedi are more about listening to the Force. The Sith are more about
Dominating
the Force, using the Force to their own advantage, trying to be the Force. Could it be a self-fulfilling prophecy? Did like the existence of the Sith define the dark side?
I would say, like, I mean, since there's only, I guess there's more than two at any given time.
Oh, I'm talking originally, like way back in the early stages of like the galaxy and like, the Old Republic era or even beyond, like the beginning of the Sith. Was there a conception of the dark side of the Force pre-Sith?
Technically there was, yes. At least, again, this may be legends, I don't know. But my understanding of it is the original Jedi, they practiced both. If they got too far in the dark, they were sent on exile to this, the dark side of this moon. If they were too far in the light, they had to go do some other thing. But this is way origin stuff that obviously is not nearly as fleshed out as what we have, current day.
Yeah. I mean, in many regards, it's kind of like, as the Force is conceived by the vast majority of the galaxy, it's more of just like a religion.
Kind of.
The faith.
Or just kind of like a spiritual belief that some people have, some people don't. It's like whatever. It's like any other, who knows, like hocus pocus, as Han Solo would say.
I think it is. Yeah, I mean, sort of
like you hear the stories of these Jedi who are like,
everything happens for a reason.
More kind of like that. And it's like sometimes the reason is because of a shitty circumstance, but everything does technically happen for a reason, And so it does. It starts off, but we have that type of thinking, that magical thinking in everyday life.
But with the Force, there's actual evidence that it can be. It transcends typical everyday natural occurring events.
Yeah,
it doesn't suspend the laws of physics in real life to have faith.
Well, that's the definition of faith. I mean, it's interesting. Faith in the Force and, like, say, like, faith in God in the real world are kind of equal in a way. Like, the way... I mean, if you really believe that the Force kind of has, like, a will of its own as far as, like, maintaining balance in the world, if that's the primary goal...
Yeah,
you're gonna have faith in the Force to guide you in the right direction if you are still enough and listen and, like, say, empathetic enough.
And even then, if things are disappointing in your life, you're like, well, there's God works in mysterious ways is a common saying.
Yep.
And the same way with the Force, you have to ask the question, how does the Force allow these horrible, planets atrocities, planets being destroyed, systems being destroyed and enslaved.
The scale of the cosmos is much larger than the scale of a humanoid's frame of reference.
Yeah. But it's permissible. It's permissible by God, and it's permissible by.
That's not on the Force. That's on whoever commits the atrocity. Like, the Force isn't actually, like, controlling people. It's if anything, you can say Jedi's in a way can sense it and feel it. And then it's hard because
I think a better context for that is just the dark side just exists as a temptation. As to whether or not mortal races act on it or not, that's 100% up to them. It just exists as a force. It's just there. It doesn't do anything. It's not like telling them to do all the horrible things that happen.
Yeah. I mean, also let's be honest, trying to prescribe a completely thorough process for a, vague at best, fictional, like, I mean, philosophy, but like, because, okay, so the next sentence in that article is, the life force of one could be strengthened when in a force bond with another. I'm like, okay, so that's just like straight up like sequel BS, like what? But it's canon.
Pull the plug.
Release the Filoni cut.
There's no such. Oh my god. Release the Trevorrow cut.
Oh,
make the Trevorrow script, dude.
That was pretty good. That would be a good subject.
That'd be a good.
Jenny Nicholson read the whole thing, and I was actually one of the first people that was watching Rob Burnett, who is a screenwriter who got his hands on the leaked version and disseminated it on his show Rob's Observations. Like he was cool. But it would be cool to read it maybe for one of these, maybe the next one or something.
That'd be kind of interesting.
But one thing that came across my mind when you were talking about that is, on one hand, it's sort of like it's necessary that dark side users prove their loyalty to the Sith or to whoever is the boss. If they're undergoing that transformation into the dark side, they prove that they lack the empathy. So it's sort of like that was actually one of the cool things that Force Awakens did was to make Kylo Ren have to basically undergo this patricidal initiation in order to prove himself to Snoke, and that was really fucked up. It was actually the most one of the darkest scenes in the entire franchise.
Yeah, that's true.
And just basically the main point I'm making is that empathy is a very Jedi trait, a very like you want what's best, you want the universe to put the best foot forward, and you're compassionate and cooperative. To snuff that out and just be like, okay, we're all just selfish, like trying to climb the ladder of power, and it basically is like it's basically like hardening yourself to anything that is like a challenge to your I said pursuit earlier, but I don't know. It's very egotistical, and it, I don't know. Empathy. The killing of the empathy is a pretty crazy thing, but in throughout evolution, about human evolution, there's been tribes that survived because they were just better at war and better at colonizing and imperialists, And so that's a survival mechanism in human nature, and it's something we don't recognize really in society, except in these subconscious ways. There's always like the villain in a movie who's like the shadow of the hero. But Star Wars made an emphasis on like even the hero struggles with being with these villainous ideas and these calls to the sadistic, psychopathic tendencies that are displays of power, really. And I was just thinking too about how all the uniforms and glamour behind the dark side users' costumes. What just enhances their ego, like the capes and the cool helmets and the cool suits. I mean, like Dooku.
I don't know.
I'm going off on a tangent, but it is displayed sort of like opposite to Jedi, who are always in kind of like drab robes, very low, very low key, humble, plain, almost poor people's robes.
Yeah, it's very like
aesthetic.
Yeah, very aesthetic.
But the other thing I was going to say is that it's a very heavy subject, but a lot of Star Wars is clearly based off of Nazi personnel and Nazi like conformists and authoritarianism and fascism, and so but it skirts that line because it is just like a fictional allegorical version of that, and it's easier to talk about that than to Darth Vader, being an authoritarian fascist, and to bring up partly what he's based on, which is real life fascists like Hitler. But part of the dark side is that fascism, that yearning to impose your will against what you consider to be weaker or perceived as like I don't know.
I think that's more like a Sith interpretation, more so than a dark side.
Ooh, he just called you a Sith, boy. Ooh, he said you on the dark side.
I think the dark side itself is. I really do think it's just inherently mortals are what bring out the worst of the dark side.
Mortals?
Mm-hmm.
Being a mortal. A mortal.
I mean, sure, yeah. Just people who have the ability to access it. Their interpretation of it, just giving into their desires and everything, is just what makes the dark side seem shitty.
Can you elaborate?
I mean, you look at. I don't know. I mean, you look at. Let's see here. I guess once people get their hands on power, no matter where it goes, nobody with power is just going to be an all-around good person. And when you especially look at something in the back of your mind that's telling you, "Oh yes, you can do that. You have the ability to do that by use me and you'll have that ability," it just kind of snowballs out of control.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it with Anakin. In a lot of ways, you look at Palpatine's backstory, you kind of see it there. If I'm not mistaken,
once he sees an opportunity, he gets obsessed again, and he's like, "This is the only thing I could have going for me. So might as well pursue this." He's not really shown to have other like friends and accomplices, other than subordinates.
Throughout his life, he never really did. At least not until he became, higher up in the political scheme. But a lot of his background is he came from a wealthy, affluent family who was kind of falling off the affluent side, and he always thought he was different. He always thought he was better than everyone else.
He had affluenza.
Hilarious. But then, as soon as Plagueis starts teaching him about the dark side and talking to him about the dark side, he kind of starts putting it all together. And again, just the absolute worst of him finally comes out because
were you talking
very tempting power. Palpatine.
Oh. Yeah. You said Plagueis?
Well, yes, Plagueis.
Plagueis. Yeah. Okay, yeah. The Plagueis drop, damn.
Remember when we were like, "Ooh, is Snoke Darth Plagueis?"
No, we're not doing it. We're not fucking doing it.
Oh man, my outline for episode 9 was so good. Just let them like fight in the spirit realm. Let them transform into everything that they could have possibly transformed. Life is full of these.
That's another topic for another day. If we could remake the sequels, what would we do?
Mm-hmm.
But to just kind of close off what I was saying.
Yeah,
I don't think the dark side is inherently bad. I think mortals are what make it bad.
Interesting. Do you think that if we're talking about like the cosmic force having a will of its own, could it be potentially that it influences both quote unquote light and dark things to happen? Like is there kind of like an errant like dark aspect to the force that kind of like simmers? Because
I think it's this epic symphony. I mean, I think it's kind of like
think when Luke goes into the cave on Dagobah, and Yoda says that place is strong in the dark side. So he's implying that there's like this sort of concentration of dark energy beyond, the scope of like him or like somebody's going to like control or put there.
Yeah, I think if it's almost like this, if you try to understand the ideas of a creator, you're already like giving into the fact that there needs to exist like suffering and pain and horrible,
it's like
horrible things because we see those. They actually exist. So it's like
it's like the hubris of man. Who are we to, deign to say that we understand how the entire cosmos works? But actually, wow, the cave that Luke goes into that I just mentioned, where he sees the incarnation of Vader and they fight. It actually, for being supposedly the dark side, it shows him the truth. It shows his face under the Vader helmet, implying that A, it's his father, B, it could be potentially him if he takes the wrong step. And so it's like, in a way, it's like, it was scary, but it was kind of also a learning experience that the Force presented to him, supposedly the dark side of the Force. So I kind of like your posit, Derek, that the dark side of the Force isn't all quote unquote bad. Like, is darkness in the world, like in the physical world, bad? No, it just means there's no light, but it's like dark. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes there can be beauty at night, but it's also kind of a more dangerous, risky time. I don't know.
To venture into another, it's gonna get a little bit off topic, but you'll see how it plays it. Big thing I've been doing a lot lately is playing Destiny. And now, actually, the kind of main story beat of the game is you have this thing called the Traveler that is an agent of the light. And you have all these other, you kind of have these like pyramid ships that are the agents of the darkness. So it plays into almost the exact same duality. Now, lately in the game, you have your character using these dark powers. And your character doesn't necessarily become evil just because they're using these dark powers.
Yeah.
Which really calls into question, again, is the dark inherently evil? No, it's the intent of the wielder.
Agreed. That brings us back to around the idea of like the Sith are evil, but the dark side of the Force isn't inherently so.
Sometimes I think about like the things that early humans or ancestors to humans had to do to protect their tribe and protect their children and people that they care about. They often had to, kill and maim oppressors, but as well as warring tribes who were just trying to do the same thing. They were just fighting for resources and stuff. And I almost feel like that's the type of thing people can relate to and understand that there are reasons to use violence, at least historically. Now we don't have to use violence in our day-to-day life, but people still get in arguments. People still obviously do use violence sometimes when it's not, and especially nowadays it's not necessary. Most people have amenities; they don't need to rob or pillage or put themselves into a scenario where they would ever need to use violence. But I was thinking we do accept a certain violent history in our human upbringing that we can sympathize with. And I think that is an aspect of kind of what you're talking about, where the dark side is still, it's a part of us still. We still have like a vestigial connection to negative emotions and negative ideas and selfish ideas, but our stories and our the better angels of our nature help us to accept pain and suffering
without trying to retaliate against others and without trying to dominate others. So I think, you know, I kind of agree with your point that the dark side isn't bad. It doesn't make people do bad things.
But it can influence and enable them to do bad things.
Yeah.
It makes it easier to do bad things if you're not careful. Like, look at Mace Windu. Mace Windu is a Jedi, but he draws on the dark side.
That's true.
What are some of the ways he does that?
Well, Vapad, so his lightsaber fighting style utilizes both light and dark, and it uses the enemies. He is able to feed off of the enemy's negative emotion to in turn power this combined dark and light side ability.
Cool. And purple is in between blue and red.
So that's all I got on that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, masters greater and longer lived than us have pondered this. Oh, then there's also, how about this?
Right.
The, what's he called? The Bantu?
Oh, the Bendu! Yeah!
Bendu! The Bendu!
Oh, I thought that's what you were talking about when you were talking about the wills.
Bendu. So he's supposed to be just like neither. He's like neutral force.
Are the wills explored in the Clone Wars? Because when he brought up the wills, I remember seeing a clip of the Bendu. I got
Yoda visits them once, and they just kind of evaluate him, and that's really their whole involvement. I think more than anything, it's just like a nod to Lucas saying, "We heard you, buddy."
But the Bendu is much more of an actual character in Rebels. He's like this big elemental beast. Yeah.
Very reminiscent of Lion Turtle, actually.
Oh, yeah. Also written by Filoni too, right?
Partly. I mean, he wasn't one of like the showrunners of Avatar, but yeah, he was a writer on it.
Oh, true.
So, I mean, there's definitely that influence both ways.
But you know, you can. So again, I think the Bendu just kind of he almost makes it seem like the Jedi Sith squabble is like nothing to him. It's just rabble. It's children making a scene, and that's. I'm glad you brought it up because that was another thing that kind of influenced my opinion on the topic. That you have these like higher forces that just don't really care because to them that's not really how it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's like there's a scope of understanding beyond how we think of like Jedi, Sith, you know, good side, bad side stuff.
A transcendent.
Yeah. Well, it's also kind of like what is it? The Force gods from Clone Wars. What are they called? Like the ancients or like the elders. Like the father and the two siblings.
Oh yeah. Ooh, you know what? That's an interesting point you bring up.
Like I never quite understood. Like I got I got what was going on like during that like those like arcs, but like I never quite fully comprehended like what they were. Were they just like people who were extremely powerful in the Force, or were they like Force?
Is it the ones?
Avatars or something?
Yeah,
like,
they're kind of Force avatars.
That's kind of how I read it, but it was like, are they supposed to be gods or more so just kind of
like the ones were a family of exceptional, powerful Force wielders who lived on the planet Mortis during the Clone Wars. Led by the Father, the Son, and Daughter were embodiments of the dark and light sides of the Force, respectively. The son and the daughter were worshipped as the twin deities, or simply as the spirits in the Night Sisters religion. And Mortis was going to be a main character in the final film, and got like approval from George Lucas, and then they ditched it all to bring back Palpatine.
Glad they didn't do that, honestly.
But I suppose they're quite important. They can manipulate the Force like no other. It was necessary to withdraw from the temporal world and live as anchorites.
Both of them, the son and the daughter kind of have their own agendas. Where, so this is actually kind of a challenging thing, because while the son doesn't do anything inherently evil, he does have his own agenda that he wants done. So, I don't know, that leaves me thinking about a few things. I don't know that would sway me from what I said. I still think the dark side just exists as the dark side, and that's it.
What are some good ways that the dark side can be used that don't lead to maybe like warping or distorting the user into a malevolent state of mind?
Unfortunately, we don't really have a lot of insight into that.
Yeah.
Because what we see, we only ever see Jedi Sith. We don't ever just see neutral dark side user. The closest thing we get to that is Asajj Ventress.
What about Dooku?
Dooku is 100% a Sith.
Yeah.
Oh. But Asajj Ventress she stops being a Sith. She still uses red lightsabers, but she's a bounty hunter. So I guess she doesn't care.
Dark Jedi. Dark Jedi.
Yeah, okay, so you would say she falls more into the classification of Dark Jedi. Yeah. That's probably a good take.
Like uses the Force, but for generally dark self-serving means, but doesn't actually follow the Sith dogma,
And she didn't really seem all corrupted or whatever, and I think she was willing to maybe cooperate with Ahsoka is a strong word, but
coincidentally, a couple of the standout Asajj Ventress fights in Clone Wars that I can remember, aren't they actually with Mace Windu?
Maybe.
I feel like there's one on my mind's going blank. The plate Camino. And also one later on in this temple or something, whatever, it's the Clone Wars, but which is kind of an interesting mirror. It's kind of she's kind of the opposite of Mace, what he could be if he leaned into it a little bit more. And he is kind of a copy of what she could be if she kind of used her. She's a more likable character. She's quote unquote, ultimately at the end of the day, a better person than Sidious, or
Asajj didn't commit genocide, so
yeah,
she's got that up on him.
I kind of would like to see more of her, if possible, at some point in official Star Wars media.
She's dead, so.
Well, they could
obviously, honestly, I would love to see her and why do I always forget this guy's name?
Are you talking about the bounty hunter?
No. He's Jedi, green lightsaber. Obi-Wan hates him.
Oh, yeah.
I feel so embarrassed for forgetting his name. Hang on.
No, I know who you're talking about. He's apparently exists in some extended universe stuff.
What's so significant about him? God, all right, I'll find it. Quinlan Voss. God damn it!
There we go.
I am so glad I brought him up, because he actually undergoes some dark side training with Asajj during this time. But the two of them kind of have this fling for a while, to where she starts teaching him some dark side power, and he gets, I don't know if corrupted by Dooku is the right word, but he does start doing some really shady shit for Dooku. But I like, it all goes back to he is a mortal person, therefore whatever ends up happening because of him through the dark side is somewhat irrelevant, because we will never be able to determine what the dark side's actual intentions are, if they even have it. But no, God, Quinlan Voss is awesome. Surviving is he survived Order 66. We have no idea what the fuck happened to this guy after. But if he was with clones, he messed them up and just walked away.
So something that I was thinking of while we were talking, it's kind of like a trend throughout Star Wars, is dark side characters that have redemption arcs and sort of someone who like Mace Windu, who is close to the dark side, but considered essential as essentially the Jedi. Who do you feel like something extra powerful comes from the fusion of the light and the dark side? Much like Vader had like this little tiny possible redemption, at least in the potential for his character, behind all of the years and decades of just being a servant of Sidious.
Remember that time that Vader blew up Alderaan? I remember.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but like Vader is considered extremely powerful, and mind you, he had the most most iconically depicted like Luciferian fall, where he was so noble and such a good hero, and he had all these adventures in the Clone Wars and in the prequels, and he's a hero for so long until he becomes the epitome of the villain throughout the series. But even then, the very tail end, the very last original movie, he is able to redeem himself even to the point of becoming a Force Ghost, which seems to be very uncommon. So, does that mean that he had a little light side throughout his whole dark side reign?
Yeah. Because he ultimately redeems himself.
And was he using that light side to continue his dark, treacherous, fascist notions, blowing up Alderaan?
Maybe it's what made his conviction. Well, the light in him is what made his conviction so strong that he was doing maybe good to hold the galaxy together.
No, that's a good. Though recent depiction of Vader suggests that he actually just wanted to be Emperor himself and just wanted this empire, even though it would never really hold together.
Such is the goal of every Sith, ultimately, right?
So again, it's just like a mortal interpretation of the dark side. This desire of power that he thought he had may have.
Well, that's. I don't know why you said recent depictions. That's actually been part of Vader's character since the beginning. In Empire Strikes Back, he offers Luke. He says, "Hey, let's kill Palpatine and rule ourselves." In Episode 2, when he's talking to Padme on Naboo, he has that whole there should be somebody who's in control, who tells everybody what to do because it's going to be the best. She's like, "Who's that going to be? You?" And he's like, "Maybe." That's kind of been there from the beginning.
Anakin doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah, I know, right? You know what's weird? That Vader cannot sense that Leia is his daughter when he encounters her in Episode 4. He learns it from Luke.
Well, whenever you have... fuck.
Are you sure about that?
Organa, there we go. So whenever you run into Leia Organa, daughter of, this politician that you knew, and this life that you've tried your best to forget, I don't think it's the first thing that comes to mind. On top of that, I know they always hinted at her having Force ability, but I don't know. I think he was just so in those moments that she was there in Episode 4, he was just, hyped up on.
Yes, it would be such an unexpected thing, which was kind of the point, I guess. Yeah, because he finds out. Is it just Episode 6 after Luke? So. Yeah, and when they encounter on the Death Star, and Vader's he's surprised. He's he kind of reads Luke, and he's like, sister, and he's like, Obi-Wan was wise to hide her from me.
That's good evidence. So, that is strange. She should be able to sense it, but maybe her her force power were kind of very latent.
I mean, he did never meet her before, so what would be his basis for reading daughter be in the first place?
Just that, I mean, it goes to show you that maybe there's not some aura that is, prevalent at that time. I mean, her force powers must have been dormant, kind of. So normally he'd be able to read a force user, but she was not a actively force user.
Yeah, I get the feeling that she's not exceptionally strong. See, I don't want to get into the sequels, but I just need to say I kind of I mean, it is what it is, but I personally would have done Leia very differently in the sequels, but that's neither here nor there. In the original trilogy, I get the conception that, there may be some very light, force sensitivity there, but she's not an outright endowed force user.
It's only in that moment in Empire Strikes Back where she's wait, turn around. Yeah.
His absolute need.
Yeah,
reaches out.
And her twin brother. I mean, there's already other groundwork connections there.
Yeah.
So I mean, so dark side Sith. I was so kind of confused why this is never brought up, and it's a huge question that's kind of been bugging me. There must be no indication that any of these people think that there's any light side left in Palpatine, in Sidious.
Nobody even dude.
No one ever tries to look at the glimmer of hopefulness or potential goodness inside him, and I guess I don't really know what to take away from that, except that
he's an utterly lost cause. He's an utterly.
But they're sure of that. I mean, that's what people said about Vader too. It's no one can reach this guy who was just a fucking senator for a decade.
Well, he wasn't just a senator for a decade. He had been training in the dark arts since a young man.
No,
right. Yeah.
He was already a full-on powerful master by the time of Episode 1.
I forget that actually.
He's something as my man Mace, I bring up again, just said, simply he's too dangerous to be left alive. Once you already commit to the path of the Sith, which is literally do evil unto others. I mean, what are you going to redeem?
What can you say that doesn't also apply to Vader under his under his manipulation?
Maybe that's what makes Luke unique.
How much of it is actually okay? So here's where you get into the issue of nature. How much of that is Vader's nature versus Palpatine telling him to do it?
How much of what is that?
any mission that Vader ever went on, how much was that Vader being shitty, just being shitty for the sake of being shitty, or Palpatine telling him to do it?
Being a puppet for Palpatine.
I think he was a big time puppet of Palpatine.
Well, all the apprentices were ultimately, as we know.
Yeah.
But I mean, are you saying that lessens the culpability on Vader?
Yeah, I think
no. Just following orders is not a good excuse.
But somehow, this emperor is irredeemable, but like someone who we are accustomed to think of as the villain, as like the irredeemable big bad of the entire series as well. Darth Vader is redeemable. I feel like there's a contradiction there, but
I hear you.
I definitely think there is some leeway for the underlings.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that, like, do you honestly expect that Palpatine would go, you know what, you're right, I'm taking things too far?
No, I mean, but you don't expect that from Vader either.
Everybody else knows as well. But like,
the story shows you that when everything comes to its climactic moment, mercy to the unforgivable is the greatest, weapon
mass murder
the Jedi have. Yeah. Compassion.
Well, let's remember that who was the one who actually killed Palpatine? Vader.
Actually, that was Rey Skywalker.
Good point, Derek. Oh man.
No, Palpatine was killed.
Skywalker, by the way.
Palpatine was killed at the end of Episode 6. He was just reconstituted and resurrected. Canonically, quote, somehow. and then was killed.
So the dark magic of the secrets only the Sith knew.
Yeah.
By the way. So that's also one of the major problems of the sequels. Like, when you think about it, they actually, in Episode 9, Derek, you probably don't know this, but there's a whole conversation that... What?
How would I not know this?
Oh, did you see Episode 9?
Dude, I watched it a while back.
Oh, okay. Well, you remember, like, there's a conversation between a lady named Jana and Finn, and they're both former stormtroopers, reminiscing about how they were indoctrinated as children. And it's the only conversation like that. God. And then the whole other time, they're all just murdering stormtroopers indiscriminately with no concern. And it's this weird problem where the original trilogy was very specific, where it's like Jedi still have dark leanings sometimes that they have to continuously like use discipline to like correct and stuff, but they always end up doing the right thing. And even the bad guy in the originals had some goodness in him that he was able to see and redeem himself. And in the sequels, especially 9, that's not really ever a theme in the film. The complexity of morality and making hard choices, and when you involve yourself in trying to correct the universe's mistakes and trying to be a hero, it's not about throwing down your weapon and using your heart, your compassion. It's just about having another weapon.
The theme of Rise of Skywalker, there's 2 themes of Rise of Skywalker, and they're equally as important and shitty in the film. The first is Star Wars is cool. The second is you can be born more special than other people. And both of those are absolutely terrible themes to have in a film.
They fly now. There was a moment when I thought Rey killed Chewbacca that I was like, that's cool.
That's the only exciting thing that happened in the movie because it was so unexpected.
And that was the moment.
And then literally the next scene.
That was her cave of Dagobah. It wasn't literally the next scene, honestly. There was like one in between, though.
Okay.
But it was that was kind of like her moment where it was like, okay, Rey is gonna go down a dark path because of this. But then you're right, it was corrected when she felt him from afar. I think she realized he was in the ship. Someone said she was still alive. No, I think she just force sensed that he was still alive at a certain point.
I wish I could do that.
When she got close to the ship or something. But it almost had that moment where she was like, had a traumatic death on her hands, you know, an innocent, like, you know, an iconic character, you know. Fans would not forgive that, but yeah, they couldn't even go through with that because it would be so iconic, and no one would get over the fact that Rey killed Chewbacca. How crazy would that be if that was in the story? I mean, that's what I thought before they wussed out at the last minute. Like how
I thought, you know, honestly, when the first time I saw The Force Awakens, when Han gets killed, I thought that like Chewie was gonna go berserk, and he kind of started to, you know. So I thought like Chewie was gonna go berserk and like, you know, like sacrifice himself to like, you know, do something epic and like, you know, in like that like, you know, battle rage of like losing his friend, you know, and that was going to be the end of Chewie along with Han. And then they didn't go that way.
Yeah,
that would have been really. That would have been really
Kylo with the blaster, which was a big point.
That would have been really like heart wrenching if like, you know, Han gets killed and then you see Chewie just go absolutely like ham and like be like a hero, you know, in his like honor.
I do think Kylo Ren was a very interesting character that you could kind of sympathize with, like trying to be good, but also like being tempted by the light side, but really being mentally like focused on trying to be an embodiment of the dark side. That was a cool theme that they had going pretty well in the first one, in the 7. What do you think about that, Derek? I mean, do you have any opinions on the Kylo Ren character and his dark side trajectory?
Probably the best character, but at the same time, he largely worked under and like trying to be too much like Vader and not trying to be enough like the positive aspects of Anakin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But there was some stuff that was sort of like there was an internal struggle. What do you think was his like his light side struggle was sort of like maybe I am more like Anakin, you know? He constantly feels this pull towards the light, and he's like he wants to kind of quote unquote finish what he started. And
personal opinion, I don't think his draw to the light was shown very well at all. Like I know,
not known, but to him it was known. I mean, he says it to himself, like in his own personal, private time. Wasn't he somewhat trying to do the right thing? Do the right thing? You know? It's just not, you know, not developed.
No, it isn't. My favorite thing about Kylo Ren is the SNL Undercover Boss skit.
Those are the absolute best. Those are the best things that come out of the sequels.
Okay, boomer.
Okay, boomer. Kylo Ren is pretty cool, right?
What haven't we covered? Any other dark side users?
dark side, but I think there's just like too much Sith influence there to really say anything about.
And you can Can you explain your view of the major difference other than like the dark side of the Force is like the raw part of the living cosmos, whereas the Sith is the religion, and then there's dogma there. There's misinterpretations of how the Force interacts with people, but there's sort of dogma with the Jedi too, and maybe misinterpreting some of the things of the light side of the Force. Is that just basically it? Like dogma versus like the true faith?
I mean, that's my personal belief on it. That obviously doesn't make it fact, but that's just kind of how I see it.
So let's see what the Wikipedia says about the dark side. Wikipedia. Says the dark side of the Force was a method of using the Force.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's not. If you're looking at it from like utilizing the light side, utilizing the dark side, yeah, that's a method. But
Darksiders drew power from raw emotions and feelings such as anger, hatred, greed, jealousy, fear, aggression, megalomania, and unrestrained passion. And it overrode the dark side
emotions.
Yeah. The dark side overrode an individual's character and consumed the souls of those who used it, while submitting to the light side meant the death of the self and sacrificing for the cosmic force, an aspect of the Force that bounds all things together. Blah, 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 blah. Weird. There's an exiled Jedi and former Sith Kriya who valued the individual over all else. Do you believe that?
Kriya, yes.
As the light and dark sides were the two methods of using the Force itself was detrimental to individuals and thus should be removed from existence. There's a funny interpretation. So if you're going to be a light side user, do you need to use the dark side?
No.
Obviously not. Just like, I mean, you don't have to be a Sith to be a dark side user.
But you know, the most iconic Jedi used the dark side. If you're going to be powerful at all, will you need to use the dark side?
Who was the most iconic Jedi? What?
Luke Skywalker. We don't really see Yoda struggle with the dark side, except being clouded by it. Mace Windu.
Mace Windu.
Mace Windu. My bad.
That's one.
Too soon. How come some people don't struggle with the dark side, like Yoda?
I would venture to say that he is just so... He's probably just so immersed in the light that he knows what he believes, and that's that. I don't know, that's kind of not a good take, actually. I would have to think more on that one, actually.
Does hatred lead to the dark side?
Yes. As they lay it out, fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate.
Does anger lead to hate?
Hate. Isn't that it?
Does fear lead to anger?
That's it. That's what I said. Fear leads to anger.
Yeah.
Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Hate leads to suffering?
Mm-hmm.
And suffering leads to the dark side?
Kind of sounds like a Velvet Underground song or something, yeah.
I thought hate leads to the dark side.
Well, it does. It's all on the path.
But in the quote...
Fear... Because Anakin's afraid to be undergoing the trial to become a Jedi. And Yoda says, "You're afraid, aren't you?" And he's like, "Oh, fear."
Oh, you're right. He doesn't say hate leads to suffering. Sorry, he doesn't say hate leads to the dark side. He says hate leads to suffering.
Yeah, and suffering is the dark side. Essentially, that's what Yoda's saying. Or the dark side is suffering. You won't be fulfilled. You'll ultimately be, not living your best life.
The path to hell
is paved with beer.
Well, that doesn't make very good paving.
Well, we have a lot to ponder moving forward into the future.
Absolutely.
I'm sure we will touch on all of this stuff again. But I think it's about time to probably wrap up this episode of Tosche Station.
This has been Tosche Station. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what you want to know the answer to, and we might devote a whole podcast episode to it if it's a good question. And thank you for joining me today at Tosche Station. I'm Dennis. And you're Rob. And he's Derek.
I'm Derek. It's me. It was me the whole time. I was Derek.
It was Derek all along.
No, fuck me.
I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling Jawas.
Yes.
That's good.
Jawas. Well, all right, gentlemen. Stay tuned. Tune in. Drop out.
Turn on the Tosche Station.
Turn on the Tosche Station. Cheers. I better leave this Mustafarian realm. And may God have mercy on us.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.